what's up guys? This is Sumner from landinvestor.co. Today we've got an incredible interview with Ajay. He talks about how one of his first deals, he bought it for $110,000, sold it for over $450,000. We cover everything about his land investing journey from start to finish. You guys are going to get a ton of nuggets on how he is running his multi-six-figure land investing business. This is a two-part interview series, so make sure you stick around for the first part, and then the second video will be uploaded. It'll be tagged at the very end of this video, and you'll be able to go click on the end card and watch the video. So without further ado, we're going to jump into this interview with Ajay. Hope you enjoy. What's going on, guys? This is Sumner from landinvestor.co. I'm joined by my friend Ajay here, and what we're going to do today is just do a deep dive, really kind of like an informal fireside chat going over his land investing business. I'll touch on some things in my land investing business, and I really want you to feel like you're a fly on the wall just seeing two land investors chit-chatting. And Ajay and I met at a mastermind in Texas about 3 months ago. I think that was in October. And these are the kinds of conversations we were having in person. And while I was having these conversations, I was thinking, geez, if I was starting at step one, if I was in the beginning of my origin story, this is the stuff I would want. Just impromptu, informal, off the cuff, honest conversations between two land investors that are doing this full time. And so that's what we're going to do today. Ajay, I appreciate you making the time and stopping by. I know you got lots of land to flip, so this is definitely not really aiding to that. So I appreciate you coming on. We're going to start just with one of my favorite questions. I think every land investor that's been doing this for any amount of time has a favorite deal. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the most profitable deal, but a deal that brings a smile to your face. It could be the story, it could be the turn time, or it could be the profit. Anything come to mind there?
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, just thanks for having me on, Sumner. It is awesome to get to chat, man. I'm so grateful we get to do this. But this will be my most profitable deal, this story here. It's a funny one because it really was a catalyst for my life, which is why I'm so grateful for it. It has kind of a long story, so you're going to have to be patient with me here. But it's funny. It was tied actually to my first ever lead. So first campaign ever. This was September of 2020 when I got started. And I did the whole yellow postcard tax delinquent thing. You know, I feel like you've got to do your time, right? Yeah. Or at least that's what people told you back then. And so I sent out my first mailer, probably 150 units of mail, something crazy small like that in a random county in Wisconsin. And my first callback was this old man who was like a recluse that lived on a trailer on his properties that he sued his sister for to get after his father passed away, whose grandfather bought it back in like 1934 for like 3 pennies an acre. Just something crazy, man. So this lead hits my pipe. I'm 22, a few months out of college. I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm like 3 modules into like the RE Tipster course at this point. Yeah. Like I know nothing, besides some of the fundamentals of like how to send out mail and what land investing is. So I get this lead and it's 6 parcels and altogether make up about 114 acres of land or so. Well, so again, I've got no money, no experience.
Did you have an offer on this little postcard, or was it straight just neutral letter?
Straight neutral, man. I had no idea. I didn't even know about price or any of that stuff back then. Like I had no network, no idea, no money. It was a wild time. So I get this lead. I look it up on the GIS system and find out there's 6 different parcels there. Okay. And so one of them is this nice little half acre that's riverfront. It's mostly wetlands, but it's in this county that's between, I don't know if you know Wisconsin geography at all, but between Madison and Milwaukee, which are like the 2 most major cities in Wisconsin. And so there was a lot of it's a secondary, maybe tertiary market, but there's a lot of like random demand that pops up kind of in the sticks out there. So we had this half acre property. I offered the guy $2,000 for it. He said yes. It was great. There was some garbage on it, some back taxes. I was all in at $3,500. I found a realtor who was a 6th generation native to the town. She ends up having a buyer lined up like that, has it sold for $15,000 before I even owned it, which was awesome.
And this is your first deal.
So this is my first deal and isn't even the actual story I'm telling.
Right.
So fast forward.
A great deal though, nonetheless.
Oh, fantastic first deal. Man, I just made $9,000 on like something that I had no idea what I was doing.
Dude, you just moved some papers, right? You
Honestly.
Shuffled some papers and made $9,000.
And I made a ton of mistakes along the way, but it was awesome. So fast forward, it's probably now June of 21. And I'm sitting with my best friend's parents growing up. We're out at lunch back in my hometown, Bloomington, Indiana. Shout out Hoosiers. We're we're eating, and they're like, "Oh, like, hey, my buddy's name is Ryan." They were like, "Ryan mentioned you were like starting up this real estate business. What's going on there?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm flipping land." I'm telling them I'd done maybe 4 or 5 deals at this point, right? And they asked me like, "Oh, like, could you do anything if you had some money?" And again, man, I don't know how to do deals consistently, so that thought hasn't even crossed my mind of like raising capital because I don't know how to make deals yet, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." And they just downsized their house, so they were like, "Well, could you do anything with 135 grand?" And I'm like, wow, that's just like an ungodly amount of money. I don't know. Right. So, man, I am racking my brain. I'm like, how do I deploy that much capital? Yeah. And the rest of that guy's acreage popped up in my brain. Yeah. So I give old boy a call and he still has it, still wants to sell it. And I'm like, okay, I might have the capital to take this thing down. So we look at the property, prime hunting land, man. And it is 10 minutes outside of this small town. Probably an hour from Madison, an hour from Milwaukee, somewhere just kind of in between those. Oh yeah, heavily wooded. So perfect for duck hunting, deer hunting. Like it was literally the neighboring 90 acres was like I forget what it was called, but people would pay money to go hunt there basically. And so it was just prime hunting land in between 2 major markets. So my realtor tells me like, oh, this thing is definitely worth at least, I don't know, 300K or so. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I call old boy up. Hey, what do you want? And he says, I don't know, about 1,000 an acre. And so, we've got 114 acres on this. And I'm like, okay, so if I offered you about 110,000, how'd that be? How does that sound? He said, well, sounds pretty good. And again, man, there were a ton of hiccups along the way. So I had to figure out, how do I draft this private note with my friends? Because we did a private note. I gave them interest on their money, which was great because I got to retain a lot of the equity in the deal. Yeah. I had to figure out the facilitation of this stuff. He needed a post-occupancy agreement. He was going to live on this trailer on the property for like a month after we owned it. But I just wanted to take title to it as fast as possible so that I owned the property. Yeah. So I like hired an attorney in Wisconsin and like figured out all these things. It was a crazy, crazy deal, man. But my realtor had 2 buyers lined up as soon as I owned it for 2 different pieces of it. We ended up selling the thing for $450,000. It was awesome, man. Keep in mind, this is like my 6th deal. I'm 23 years old. And I just netted like, I think after I paid my investors and attorneys and back taxes and all this other stuff, I netted like $270K on this deal. Dude,
from a yellow letter. I mean, that's what's so incredible about this business is that like so much of what we do with direct mail is just timing. You could have the worst copy, the ugliest letter. You could have no offer price. You catch them at the right time. They just happen to see it. They happen to be like thinking about selling. You're on it. You're onto something. Yeah, that's insane. I'm a little jaded. I've never had a singular deal with that kind of return of that kind of dollar amount. My beginning origin story was horrific. It was like buy for 500, sell for 1,400 type stuff. That's incredible, man. That is incredible. So have you been redeploying that capital back into your business? Did you do anything special with that money?
Yeah, man. I actually just went to the bank. I put it all under my mattress. Haven't touched it since. I'm just kidding.
Dug a hole in your backyard. Yeah.
No, man. Yeah, it's crazy how quick cash goes. That's what I'll say.
In this business, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And you think you have just unlimited amounts of capital until you actually start deploying it. So, that deal happened, and now it's probably October of 21. I'm at a place now where I'm like, great, I have enough cash that I can mail consistently at least. I still have my W-2 during all this, I should mention.
What was your W-2?
I was a tech consultant. So I was doing like IT project management for Fortune 200 companies. Gotcha. It sounds sexier than it is. I mean, it was a lot of spreadsheets and meetings and notes and, everything that an entry-level position. Yeah, it was honestly like I had great work-life balance, which is whatever. People treated me super well. Like if I just wanted to work corporate forever, it would have been a great, trajectory for me. Yeah. But I say this all the time. I had so much internal trouble with not being able to control my income. Like, I was 22 making almost 70 grand a year. And I was like, man, you're telling me I can't do anything to make more this year? Like, and I have no problem with the amount of money I'm making. Like there's not anything crazy I want to do with it. I don't live an extravagant lifestyle. but I just have trouble with, I can't work harder or do some crazy cool stuff to move the needle on this. Like it just didn't sit well with
have
me.
No correlation to the output. I mean, honestly, you could just kind of sit on your butt and skate away at 20 hours a week and still get the same paycheck. Some people love that for that reason. I think folks that have this internal drive, it's disgusting, honestly.
Yeah, agreed. But back to your question. Sorry, I didn't answer it. So I immediately invested in, I heard this, I think from Carlos Reyes, which is this house wholesaler, where he said, look at your marketing as an investment instead of looking at it as an expense. Now, obviously, like on your P&L, it's an expense. But every time I've sent out a direct mail campaign, especially in that first like 18 months, oh my gosh, you learn so much from the feedback if you're willing to listen. You know what I mean? You're too high, you're too low. I get 20 letters a day. I get this, I get that. Like you just learn so much from sending out a ton of marketing. So that was number one, is I just started mailing 10,000 letters a week right then and there. And I was drowning. A month. I'm sorry.
Damn.
No, not that crazy. Yeah. What I did do right after though is I hired a bunch of coaches in my life. So I think a month after that, I did one-on-one with Travis King for about a year. I hired Clint Turner as a coach. I hired like a life coach, which is really more like therapy. You know, life coaches have like a weird kind of stigma to it. I just couldn't find a therapist, to be honest, and wanted to work through all this stuff. And this guy was like entrepreneurially geared. And so it was awesome. We still meet once a week. And then I hired an accountability coach a little bit after that, because I realized the number one thing I needed to do was invest in myself. And so as soon as I did that, man, the deals started coming, like stuff starts making sense. You just learn at such a fast pace when you're willing to. I bought most courses under the sun, like tried to network aggressively. And like, I think one of my biggest takeaways from that was to not be afraid to pay for your network. Like, I think people are really scared to like join this $10,000 mastermind or go do this thing or go to this event or whatever. Man, I was buying this, $10,000 ticket to go to some random conference. I don't know if you're a YouTube guy at all, Valuetainment, Patrick Bet-David. Yeah. So I go to their events every year and like, I always get the most expensive ticket because I'm rubbing shoulders with all these guys making 10 times more than me. And I learn a ton. Having them in my network is awesome. Like, it is definitely something you get an ROI on. And so honestly, I think I spent somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 in just investing in like programs and events and education and coaching and all this stuff last year. Now, aside from that, like I built up my land business and deployed it all into deals and like grew the snowball, if you will, right? But it goes quick. So you got to make sure you make more of it.
It certainly does. I mean, especially in this business, especially if you're funding even a small percentage of your deals. Right. You brought up two really good points. This is what I found kind of as a truism, is like the first best investment you can make is into education or some kind of accountability or coaching. And quite frankly, I always feel like I'm not doing enough of that. And it's partially because I feel like there's not a great resource out there to categorize who's the best in a certain category. It's a lot of like, someone recommended this person, yada, yada, yada. Every single time I've invested in myself, though, even if the education is crap, like I've gone through some programs or paid money for coaching that was honestly underwhelming. But what you're showing yourself is you're worth it. You're putting money on the line and you start acting differently. You start showing up differently. And even if you get very, very little on the education side of things, there's a real tangible kind of like intrinsic motivation that you get. It's another extra kind of kick in the pants. I've never lost money on one of those investments. In fact, I would say that has the best investment out of anything in my life. Second best investment in my life would be mail. And I think that far too many newer land investors look at mail as, like you said, as an expense. And quite literally, yes, you'll file it as an expense. But like the number one KPI, in my opinion, in a land business is ROAS, return on ad spend. Because if that's functioning well, if that's operating at a number that makes sense, which I think conservatively, like 10x on your marketing spend in terms of net is certainly doable. You might not be getting that in your first 90 days or first 6 months. As you become more proficient with market selection and pricing, it's certainly attainable. We see pretty typically for every 1,000 letters we send, we get about 7,500 to $7,000 net back into our business.
Nice.
That's net after all operating expenses. So once you see that, it's like no brainer. Just
send out more mail.
Send out more mail. The crazy thing about this business is it doesn't matter where you're mailing, cost of data and the cost of mail never changes. The only like real sliding expense that we have in this business as we scale our marketing is operational expenses. but even that's super lean. I mean, you could run this business on a very, very lean team, even at 20, 30, 40,000 mailers a month. That's one of the reasons I love this business. I think far too many folks that are getting started, they're scared to send mail. And there's a truth to the fear, because if you do put the money out there, you're never going to get it back. It's not like selling a piece of land. You can sell it at a loss and get some of your money. It's not the case with mail. But it's pretty darn easy to develop the skill of market selection and market research. Hey, fellow land investor, we're going to do a quick commercial break here, and that is for our Land Investing Accelerator program. Look, if you are looking to scale and grow a 6- and 7-figure business and go and join dozens of other land investors, you're going to want to check out the Land Investing Accelerator program. In fact, you can actually book a 1-hour strategy call with yours truly to learn all the ins and outs of running a land investing business totally for free. And through that process, we'll identify if joining the Land Investing Accelerator program is a good fit for you. This is our group coaching model. This is how we've turned beginners to 7-figure land flippers in just under a few years. We've got dozens of incredible members in there. So if you're looking to grow your land business in 2023, this is the place to be. You guys can book a call with yours truly down below, or you can head over to landinvestor.co to learn more about the LEA program.
Yep.
Dude, that is a crazy first deal. Or not first deal, but first life-changing deal. I think every land investor has had one life-changing deal, one deal that pushed them into the full-time territory, or one deal that convinced them that, holy crap, I could do this as a business, as a career. That's better than most people's. That is a heck of a deal. Let's talk about what your business looks like today. I reckon not every single deal you're doing today looks like that. So walk us through team size, volume, kind of land subtype you guys go after, your bread and butter. Let's kind of run through that. Where are you guys at?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny, since you and I met, I made quite a few changes in the business, all for the better, which has been awesome. But we now have, including myself, 5 on the team. Okay. So I brought in a COO that I'm doing some profit splitting with, JV, equity, whatever you want to call it. He makes money, I make money when the business makes money. So brought him in, which was awesome because I'm a big visionary guy. And so I have struggled for a long time with doing some of the detailed work that you need to do to move the needle. Like, it's like I could cast the vision and you know, like, we could make this think it's going to be really good all day long, but if you don't do the work, man, you're not worth your stuff, you know? So that's been huge for the team. I have 2 virtual assistants from the Philippines, one who's and these roles are not as segmented as like they will be probably in the end. But for now, one VA who's focused on texting, and she just found out she likes comping properties. And so, I always tell my team, if you have an interest in something, let us know and we can see if you enjoy it and you're good at it. Like, I see no reason why you couldn't be doing these things. And she took an interest in comping. And so we were like, have at it, and she's been doing great. I mean, within 5 to 10% of how I would comp the property. Wow. And I don't have to do it. So, reasonable.
So, quick question on that.
Sure.
And this is the age-old debate when it comes to texting. Are you guys sending out just a neutral text and she's comping every inbound lead? Okay. Wow. It's a lot of comping.
So yes, with some caveats. So the way our process flow works is, and let me just run by like everybody on my team first, and then I'll get into this. Yeah. So we have texting VA, and then we have like what I would call more of a due diligence VA. So she's doing like initial due diligence, like facts or faster, if you're familiar with either of those frameworks that are out there. I think Clint Turner says facts. So, floodplains, wetlands, access, all that kind of stuff, utilities, taxes. And then we do a phone call where we'll get basically, I call it information gathering. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes you just have random phrases that stick. It was one of those that just did. And so in that phase, that's where you verify name, phone number, email, you get contact info, then you verify who's on title, what's your motivation, what do you want for the property, all that stuff. And then we comp the property after we've had that conversation. So we want to make sure somebody's actually interested in selling before we use the team's bandwidth to comp a property. And I can walk through my actual process flow in a second. And then after that, I have a US-based employee that closes the deals. That's her job. Is she just, once we know motivation, once we know price point, she gets on the phone and makes offers. And she is just fearless, man. I love it. Like, it's just not afraid to make the worst offers.
Wow.
So,
dude, that's a really fascinating process. I've actually never seen this in the land business. This is common in like any other sales environment, though. You've got like the setter or the pre-qualifier,
exactly,
or the closer, right?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Did you come up with that on your own? Did you have that from previous experience? Where'd you come up with that idea?
Yeah, it kind of happened. It was weird. It happened sort of organically. Like, I feel like everybody has this proclivity to take the conventional wisdom of everybody in the land business,
Sure.
and it makes our businesses worse sometimes.
Yeah.
And then I started rubbing shoulders with all these like mortgage guys, which rest in peace because the rates are up and they're not doing as well now. But I learned a lot about how their teams flowed. And I'm like, wait, so you can have a mortgage guy make 70 grand a month, per like mortgage guy with this process flow. And it's like, yeah, like this is great. And,
Yep.
And these are small shops where they've got 10 to 15, 1099 contractors, and they're just ripping through them and so I stole from a lot of those guys, the house wholesalers, the mortgage brokers, and kind of tried to leverage their process a bit and see what worked in my business. Like, I'm really like,
try the alternative. Did you try the old adage of just like an acquisition manager that just calls everyone? Did you see a noticeable difference between the two?
So here's where I struggled
Yeah.
was I couldn't do the volume I wanted to do with the traditional. Like, I just felt like they were so split brained on what the responsibilities were.
Right.
Because, man, you like send out texts and then you're trying to call and then you're comping and then you're making an offer. And it's just like, it's this like super long thing. And, you started out land investing, you probably didn't have a team when you first started, right? Man, how many days did your head spend looking at your pipeline?
Dude, every day. I never had any kind of grasp on what was going on in my business.
Right.
Flying by the seat of my pants. I'm
Still
curious
am.
yeah, it doesn't really change too much, I guess. Now I just watch my team fly by the seat of their pants.
Right.
Live vicariously through them. So have you experienced it with sellers having any kind of agitation with like the lack of congruency or talking to two different people, or do they explain that on the first call? Is that something that comes up at all?
It's a good question. So very seldomly will that be a concern, because we have the first phone call and we set the tone. We say, hey, like this call is just so we can understand, what we're doing, so we can put an offer together for you. We should have another offer out in 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
So we set the tone. I have only, in the past quarter, I've only had one person get really mad. I'm laughing, man. This call was so funny because it was while I was training my acquisitions manager. So what I would do is I would have her on the screen because she's remote, and I would call and put it on speakerphone.
Oh, you just
I'm sorry, I can't even. Oh yeah. I was like, I caught her and it sounded like she was in a bit of a rush. And so, I was like, hey, and we're going to protect her name. I'll call her Sandra. I was like, hey, Sandra, just wanted to check it. How much time do you have for this phone call? I just want to be respectful of your time. And she was like, I got 2 seconds before you make an offer. And then like dropped some profanity and then hung up on me.
It's actually a good training call, though. You know why? Not all roses and sunshine with calling sellers.
I think I downloaded the call off Open Phone and dropped it in our team Slack and was like, just another beautiful day closing deals or something.
It do be like that sometimes.
Right.
The territory. So outside of that, though, not a whole lot of folks being like, what the heck? I thought I was talking to Susie. Now I'm talking to Bill.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
No.
I think that's partially too, like people have this whole idea of like, oh my God, overseas acquisition or dispo manager is talking to sellers or buyers. No way. Like they're going to pick up on the accent. It's probably much of the same where actually people just don't really care.
Yeah,
that's really fascinating. I feel compelled to split test that in my business, maybe for a quarter or so. I mean, I think one of the hardest things about scaling an acquisition team is trying to get them to understand where they should be channeling their energy. Like it's really difficult to pre-qualify in this business. And it's even more difficult for someone that's not us, right? Like I've been doing this long enough. I can smell it. I can look at the lead form and be like, no, or yes. For them, it's a lot more difficult. And so sometimes when I'm going through their KPIs and their CRM, I'm like, you're spending 30 minutes talking to someone that's never going to do a deal with us, right? I think this will help redirect them in the right area, at least for your acquisition manager. The setter is going to be wasting some time. That's okay. So setter, is that overseas?
Yep. That's overseas. And I mean, she's got great English.
US?
Yeah. Acquisitions manager is US. And I don't think it needs to be that way. Like I know plenty of people that have acquisitions managers that are overseas. So like I come from an immigrant family. My family's from Nepal.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I grew up around plenty of immigrants, and I live downtown Chicago now, where there's also a huge immigrant population. I bring that all up to say, like, we live in this country that honestly was built off immigration, truthfully, right? Like, and so I don't think people are that surprised by slight accents as long as they don't take away from the conversation. That's my caveat, is if it's difficult to actually understand you, we have a different problem right now, right? But if you just have an accent, man, I don't care. You could be from anywhere, like the apartment next door could be somebody from like Bangladesh, and I wouldn't, why would I be like, oh, I would never buy anything from this guy? Like,
I agree. That's why I tell people when they have trepidation around hiring overseas is that, like, call any local company. You could get someone with an accent. Like, this is a melting pot. Right. These are the areas that where I do find that it can cause friction hiring overseas. Is obviously, if it's so hard to understand them, sure. But that's pretty easy to suss out before you hire them. Exactly. What's not is connection. A bad connection will ruin a good phone call. Like,
very true.
No matter what. The next is verbiage, right? Like, we use weird words in this business.
Yeah.
I get a lot of people in the Philippines that call land like the most bizarre combination of words, acre plots. Like, it's like, what? And that would be somewhat the same for someone here in the US too. You do need to train on the words that are common in this business. Right. But I think that, if you can have those solved, it's actually not a big deal at all.
Right. And that's just a matter of getting the reps, right? Like, it's one of those things where, like, you have to be willing to accept that when people are learning just the way we were when we were learning, dude, you're going to suck for a bit. Yeah. Like, I sucked. I still suck in a lot of different ways, as long as your employees are willing to learn and you yourself are willing to teach them and learn along the way, you're going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too many people have this unrealistic idea of what hiring is or what leading a team is. It's like, dude, especially in the first quarter or even longer for a complex role like an acquisition manager, which I think there's a lot of complexity to that, right? Like, you have to be somewhat analytical and understand how to comp properties, do subtle, like, high level due diligence, and how to speak with sellers and build a rapport. There's a lot going on there. Most people are going to not be very good, and potentially for a while. And even in the long term, if someone's at 80% of what I am, that's okay. Like, I think everyone wants to, like, hey, hire people that are better than you. That's the ideal scenario. It's certainly not easy, though.
Right.
Like, hiring is a game of bringing 10 people onto your team, 3 of them stick, 7 leave, or eventually leave. And you're always kind of turning over and hoping the good ones stay. It takes a long time to amass a really quality team. The folks that are on your team here in the US, well, we went over the COO role, which is exciting. I don't think that was in place when we spoke in October, although I think it was on your mind at the time. For your acquisition manager, just because this is something that we talk about a lot, what's roughly the comp plan look like for a US-based acquisition manager?
Yeah, so just for context too, I found her on hiremymom.com. So in case people are looking for the platform, I feel like a ton of land investors use that, and they have so many quality candidates that come through. So she is actually a newer mom. So the situation was also perfect in the way that she, like, wanted to watch her daughter grow up and just be present at home. We started her comp at $16 an hour plus $100 bonus for every property we bought. I told her she would get a raise in 90 days. I don't know, probably be somewhere between 18 and 20, just depending on, like, how much business she's brought in. I have been really happy with her, and she's been around for about 45 days now, I think. So I think she came in sometime in November. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's where I started. I mean, I think people, again, have this notion that, like, if you're hiring somebody better than you, they've got to be like 60 grand a year, right? And it's like, no, you can find people in that $15 to $20 an hour range that are absolute just, and I'm going to say killers, but with a caveat. Like, they don't need to be the killers where they're up till 3 a.m. trying to close a deal. Like, truthfully, man, they just need to be consistent and be able to build rapport. And if you do those things, like, you're going to get deals all day long.
You will. Dude, this game is like, there is some salesmanship to it to a certain extent. I see a lot of the salesmanship comes up in the persistency or follow-up cadence. Like, we follow up as if we're a sales team. But when we're on the phone, it's customer service. It's rapport building. It's talking to them like they're your neighbor and you need to borrow some sugar, right? Like, it's very, very straightforward. And that's actually a hard quality to hire for, I think. I've struggled with it, right? And so if you can find someone like that, they're a killer in our business, but they probably wouldn't be a killer elsewhere. That's really fascinating. I've used Hire My Mom. I never pulled through with any of the candidates.
Gotcha.
full disclosure, like we got a lot of change going on with our acquisition team right now. It's a blend of, I don't think my acquisition manager is at the caliber that we need. She's good. She's not great. I need great. I do need someone that's at that level. And she's got a very, very, very strong comp plan for being overseas. She would probably make just about the same as what your gal would make. I also, though, at the same time, potentially feel the need to bring on a second acquisition manager. I don't know for you guys, and I'm curious if you have any of these KPIs handy, but we track everything meticulously on our acquisition team and really the business as a whole. But what I found is about 100 to like 150 leads per acquisition manager a month is kind of where they start capping out. That could be different for you, though, since you have a bit of a split. How many deals is your acquisition manager closing? How many people are they talking to on like a monthly basis or daily basis? What do their KPIs look like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'll be super transparent with you, Sumner.
I don't know the numbers.
They're rough. And honestly, I've got a Google sheet where they're tracking all their stuff.
Okay.
I know, here's what I'll tell you is right now, after the Learn Land event, I turned off all my marketing except for text messages.
Yeah.
I was part of a PPC subscription. I was doing cold calling. We were doing text messages and I had direct mail, and that direct mail was segmented between neutral letters and blind offers.
Oof.
And man, there was just a lot of noise, if I'm being honest. And so I said, I'm turning it all off, and text messaging has been the most predictable deal flow for us, because I could tell you with pretty decent confidence, if I send out 600 text messages a day, I'm probably going to get about a deal a week. And so I knew if we just did that consistently day in and day out, pulled the deals out, got our process consistent, I'll go layer in blind offers in all the areas we hit that we like again. You know, it's really easy to do that once you have the data. It was about compiling it. That was the issue. And then getting my team set up in that kind of, lead in, appointment set, close deal fashion has been a lot of the working that we've had to do. So I bring that up to say the way it looks right now, because we're all text messages, is on average, we'll get 5 to 6 new leads a day. It's like within that like 3 to 8 range, but I would say we kind of average 4, 5, 6. Of those that we push into our CRM, there's some that kind of stay in that, what I have in my business is a due diligence column until we've gone through like the facts check, and then I've also spoken to them on the phone. I'm really, really big on speaking to them on the phone before we make an offer, because I think rapport is where a lot of people fail in this business. Yeah. Especially folks that come out of, I don't want to name specific communities, but some of the communities that teach only do blind offers, automate everything in your business. There's no reason to ever talk to anyone ever. And I'm being a little extreme, but truthfully, there's some people that come out of some, and so I could tell you, I could hit any of those counties and have deals pulled out of them because I know people are leaving meat on the bone. I'm like, well, fine. If you don't want to talk to the seller, my team will, and I'll get the deal, because we sell trust and convenience. Yeah. And if you can do those two things, you're just always going to have deals. Sorry, I get sidetracked a lot, man. I know you asked about KPIs.
Yeah.
Truthfully, I have not maxed out my acquisitions manager yet, just because she's so new.
Is she working full time currently?
She's only 5 hours a day, and it hasn't been an issue. So she's able to make like 20, 30 calls pretty easily and have. I need to get tracking on the meaningful conversations. I have that as a metric, and I just haven't.
Do you know her daily talk time? Cumulative?
I don't. I know it's on open phone. I've just not, and I know it's something you've said too, so it's on my radar, but I've been introducing the metrics real slowly. I try not to ever just
you can have too many
shake
KPIs.
up.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, I agree.
So I introduce them slowly.
Yourself and your team.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm always asking my team, like they have, all the acquisitions team has a biweekly stand-up. Biweekly is in twice a week, not every other week, where they all meet to talk about deals. And it started out as a daily stand-up for 5 minutes. It's really 5 minutes on the calendar just to talk about anything any of them need to talk about. And they said, hey, Ajay, once a day it's too much. And I'm like, okay, what do you want? And they said twice a week, Tuesday, Thursday. I said, okay, great. And now they're just like, it's fantastic, actually. Like they communicate super well. I see the messages. Like they've all bonded too, which is what you want. And they just like have a really good chemistry.
Paramount. Yeah.
Exactly. So still just working through the feedback from the team, trying to figure out, is this valuable? Okay, that metric is not valuable. And so I'm testing my team's kind of limits right now. So I don't have good numbers for you, unfortunately. What I can tell you is we're getting about a deal a week. It's all through texting right now.
Deal a week, all through texting. She's doing 30 or some odd calls a day. I would reckon her talk time is probably an hour 15, which is pretty good. I like to see 2 hours a day of talk time. We don't always hit it. For me, meaningful conversations, anything over 15 minutes. Some CRMs will label it as 5 minutes or what have you, but 15 minutes for us is what we shoot for. Ideally more. Okay. I notice the deals that we get, the great deals that we get, there's usually multiple phone calls, and some of those run really long, right?
Right.
So I think that's super valuable.
All right, guys, that is the end of part 1. Make sure that you go and watch part 2. It is even better, or maybe just as good as part 1. So if you enjoyed it, I'll see you guys in part 2.